Okay, so we are in Job 16 and 17. We basically went through it the first time. I said we were going to go through it twice because it gives us two pictures of Job, basically, and two pictures of Jesus. Mostly it's the two pictures of Jesus that we want to see clearly. The first go through, we looked at Job and his own situation and how he was crying out for a heavenly witness, an advocate, and an intercessor and friend, and how he um, came to the conclusion or was told by God. He came to the conclusion, directed by the Spirit, that he has a heavenly witness, advocate, intercessor, and friend. And so he is, in that sense, Job is every one of us, who the Lord Jesus is our advocate, friend, intercessor, and witness in heaven on our behalf. Uh, but Job, of course, suffers a lot more than we do, and we have, and we Job probably suffered more than any of us will ever suffer. And in this regard, in his suffering, he is also a picture of the Lord Jesus, and he's a real close picture of him. And so I wanted to go through it twice. And as I said, we finished going through it one time last week, looking at it, Job, and he's looking for his intercessor. And we talked about that. But now I want to go through it and see Job as a picture of Jesus. And so I want to read again chapters 16 and 17. And this time when I read through them, I want you to think about or think about how is Job foreshadowing Jesus in his situation, in the sufferings he's enduring, and even in the words that he uses to describe himself. So I'll go ahead and read the passage. Let's see. The last thing I have to do is open up the passage. There it is. Okay, Job 16. Um, then Job answered and said, I've heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all. Shall windy words have an end, or what provokes you that you answer? I also could speak as you do. If you were in my place, I could join words together against you and shake my head at you. I could strengthen you with my mouth, and the solace of my lips would assuage your pain. I think it's from here on that Job now is going to really start looking like Jesus. If I speak, my pain is not assuaged, and if I forbear, how much of it leaves me? Surely now God has worn me out. He has made me desolate, or he has made desolate all my company, and he has shriveled me up, which is a witness against me. And my leanness has risen up against me. It testifies to my face. He has torn me in his wrath and hated me. He has gnashed his teeth at me. My adversary sharpens his eyes against me. Men have gaped at me with their mouth. They have struck me insolently on the cheek. They mass themselves together against me. God gives me up to the ungodly and casts me into the hands of the wicked. I was at ease, and he broke me apart. He seized me by the neck and dashed me to pieces. He set me up as his target. His archers surround me. He slashes open my kidneys and does not spare. He pours out my gall on the ground. He breaks me with breach upon breach. He runs upon me like a warrior. I have sewed sackcloth upon my skin and have laid my strength in the dust. My face is red with weeping, and on my eyelids is deep darkness, although there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. O earth, cover not my blood, and let my cry find no resting place. Even now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and he who testifies for me is on high. My friends scorn me. My eye pours out tears to God, that he would argue the case of a man with God, as the Son of Man does with his neighbor. For when a few years have come, I shall go the way from which I shall not return. My spirit is broken, my days are extinct, the graveyard is ready for me. Surely there are mockers about me, and my eye dwells on their provocation. Lay down a pledge for me with you. Who is there who will put up surety for me? Since you have closed their hearts to understanding, therefore you will not let them triumph. He who informs against his friends to get a share of their property, the eyes of his children will fail. He has made me a byword of the peoples, and I am one before whom men spit. My eye has grown dim from vexation, and all my members are like a shadow. The upright are appalled at this, and the innocent stirs himself up against the godless. Yet the righteous holds to his way, and he who has clean hands grows stronger and stronger. But you, come on again, all of you, and I shall not find a wise man among you. My days are past, my plans are broken off, the desires of my heart. They make night into day. The light, they say, is near to the darkness. If I hope for Sheol as my house, if I make my bed in darkness, if I say to the pit, you are my father, and to the worm, my mother or my sister, where then is my hope? Who will see my hope? Will it go down to the bars of Sheol? Shall we descend together into the dust? I hope you were able to see some passages that sounded like the Lord Jesus speaking in his suffering. And what I want to do is go through these passages, most of these verses again, and look at New Testament testimony that makes it very apparent that Job here is a type, a shadow of Jesus. So, if anybody has anything to say at this point before I get started, go ahead and comment. I'm not looking
No.
for anything except giving you a space to say something. Okay. All right. So I have tables in the document. If you don't have the document in front of you, the first item in the table is from Job 16:4. Job, you'll remember, said, and you can look at it as we read these New Testament passages. Job said he can't save himself. You know, whatever he says, it won't save himself. But if he talks or if he doesn't talk. And Jesus is in the position where he doesn't save himself. He would not save himself. And, you know, we know that. But here are three verses. Um, so Luke 4:23, and he said to them, doubtless you will quote this to me, this proverb, physician, heal yourself. What we have heard you did at Capernaum, do here in your hometown as well. It's the physician, heal yourself, right? Come down off the cross type of thing. He doesn't do it. It's not that he in one sense is unable to do it. And that sense is because he's made a commitment to obey the Father and do what the Father wills, and to not do anything else other than that. But he chooses, you know, not to do it. So it's slightly different than Job. Matthew 27:42, he saved others, he cannot save himself. There it is, you know, right there. It's the typology being explicit there. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. Matthew 26:52 to 54. Then Jesus said to him, that is Peter, put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then should the scriptures be fulfilled, that it must be so? So Job can't save himself. He's unable to save himself. Jesus also does not save himself. So I'm just going through in the order of Job. I thought about going through it in the order of the New Testament revelation, but I think since we're in Job, we'll do it the Job way today. In Job 16:7, Job says of God that God has removed everyone who could declare him innocent, every good witness for him. And Jesus, all the disciples fled, everybody who could testify to his character, who knew him best. Right, Matthew 26:56, but all this take place that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples left him and fled. They all fled. In Job 16:8, Job says that God's treatment of him, of Job, testifies to other people that Job is guilty. Not that he is guilty, but he looks guilty because of the treatment. So people consider him guilty. In Isaiah 53:4, we considered him smitten by God. That's what Job is saying. God, you did this to me. Smitten by God and afflicted by God. So under God's curse, God, what God does to the suffering servant in Isaiah 53, which we know is about Jesus, makes other people look at Jesus and think he's guilty. And so it's the same thing is going on with Job. In Job 16:9, Job says that God's treatment of him kind of strengthens or encourages his enemies, which in the context of Job chapter 16 are his three friends, you know, his enemies, to treat him badly. They have contempt for him. They abandon his cause. Basically, they distance themselves from him. And we have, we just Peter denying him, right? Peter denies him 3 times, which is one example, but we already know the other disciples, except for John, at least in that scene, were nowhere to be found. They all disappeared. And they're his friends, but just like Job, Job's friends are the ones that he's calling his enemies that are treating him that way. So we have a match here. In Job 16, verse 10, Job says that people stare at him and with open mouths, just gaping at him because of his condition. They're just so shocked and astonished, right? But Isaiah 52:14, as many were astonished at you, his appearance was so marred beyond human semblance and his form beyond that of the children of mankind. So because of Jesus's condition, people stood there in open mouth, gaping at him. And so we've got another parallel. Also in Job 16:10, Job is surrounded by those, he says, they're hostile to him and they openly jeer at him and mock him. And that's a big thing in fulfillment and in prophecy. In John 18:22, Jesus standing before the high priest said something which it was true, but this is the response. When he had said these things, one of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" In the NIV, it says one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. So hit him in the face there. And obviously hostile, and then mocking is the other thing Job was talking about. In Psalm 22:6-8, about Jesus, I am a worm and not a man, scorned by mankind and despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They make mouths at me, and they wag their heads. He trusts in the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, for he delights in him. This is nearly quoted verbatim in the gospel account about Jesus on the cross, what the crowd said to him. And they were mocking him. Psalm 22, same Psalm 12 and 13. Many bulls encompass me, strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their mouths at me, like a ravening and roaring lion. This idea of attacking with your mouth or opening your mouth in astonishment, it's mocking. This is a big deal. It's mentioned a lot of times in the Gospels. Matthew 27:27-30. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him, and they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and put a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spit on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. And then Matthew 27:39-44. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." So also the chief priests with the scribes and elders mocked him, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he desires him. For he said, I am the Son of God." And the robbers who were crucified with him also reviled him in the same way. Totally surrounded by mockers. This is Job's situation. So we already read the next one. Jesus was in the passages. If you're following along, I think we're in group 3 now of the passages. Let me get back here. Okay. So Job 16:10 again. Men struck Job violently on the cheek, and Jesus is slapped or hit in the face by a Roman soldier. We already read that. 18:22. 16:10 again. This is a major verse in Job 16. The people's massed together. That's the wording he uses. Massed together against him. They gather together against him. This is a main way of talking about the opposition to Christ. Um, the Psalm 2, which I go to a lot, 1 and 2. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. They banding together. The NIV says the rulers band together against the Lord and his anointed. That passage there is quoted or referred to in Acts 4:27 and 28. For truly in this city there were gathered together against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate, along with the Gentiles and the peoples of Israel, to do whatever your hand and your plan had predestined to take place. So people are gathered together against Job. They're hostile. They surround him everywhere. They're mocking him. They slap him. They hit him in the face. They, jeer at him. These are all the things these are foreshadows, every one of them. Job's good witness is cut off. His friends desert him. Jesus' friends desert him. And it's the same. It's what we're seeing in Job is happens to Jesus, and it's pretty amazing, actually. This one is one of my favorite ones. It's Job 16:11. God has given Job up to the ungodly, right? He said, "You, God, you turned me over. You gave me up to the ungodly and the wicked," he says, right? Matthew 20:17 to 19. And as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside, and on the way he said to them, "See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified, and he will be raised on the third day." So there's another passage about mocking, by the way. So deliver over, that's the handed over, gave him over. That's the thing. He's doing, he's in God's hands for favor, and then God turns him over, so he can be brutalized, basically, by all these people listed here. And Job says that's what God did to him. I was fine. I was in your hands. Things were going well. And then you turn me over to these knuckleheads. Of course, he doesn't say it like that. He's not joking. He's in a lot of pain. But he says the wicked and the ungodly. Big theme in the New Testament, Mark 10:33 and 34. Saying, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles. And they will mock him and spit on him and flog him and kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. Luke 9:44. But these words sink into your ears. The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men. That's nearly a quote. That is a really close, strong allusion to the Job passage. Luke 24:6 and 7. Talking after the resurrection, he is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and on the third day rise. And then even in Romans, you get this language. Jesus, who was delivered up for our trespasses and raised for our justification. This delivering over is a really important thing. It's mentioned many, many times. In Job 16:12, Job says, I was at ease. I had done nothing wrong. I had committed no wrong. That's what he says. But God, you seized me and dashed me to pieces. That's what he says in Job 16:12. And in Luke 23:39-41, one of the criminals who were hanged railed against him, saying, Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us. But the other rebuked him, saying, Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong. And in that, it should be really clear from that, Job is a picture of Christ all throughout his suffering, because he is the innocent sufferer, Job is, right? In Job 16:13, Job repeats that he's surrounded by enemies. He says they want his blood, and God has poured Job's lifeblood on the ground, and he's draining out, like Paul says, I'm being poured out, like that. Same thing, Jesus says that about himself in Psalm 22:12-16. Many bulls encompass me. Strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their mouths at me like a ravening and roaring lion. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within my breast. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to my jaws. You lay me in the dust of death. For dogs encompass me. A company of evildoers encircles me. They have pierced my hands and feet. You can see some of the other themes or types that I already mentioned, are also here. In 16:14, Job basically says that he thinks this is going to completely wear him out. God's going to wear him down, and so he believes that the attack on him is threatening to completely sap all of his strength and wear him out. Jesus was faced with and under, something that would have worn out everybody else, right? But he endured, not just to the end, but beyond it, right? He endures actually beyond the end. Hebrews 12:1-2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So, the cross would have ended everybody, but not Jesus. He endures. Job believes in Job 16:11-14 that God is attacking him, or has attacked him, and is now continuing to attack him. That it was basically God. God did this, right? And that's something Job says a lot, and I think he's right. It says of Jesus in Isaiah 53:10, it was the will of the Lord to crush him. He has put him to grief. When his soul makes an offering for guilt, he shall see his offspring. He shall prolong his days. The will of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. So it was the will of the Lord to crush him. And on the outline, I have a note there that there's an echo of Genesis 3:15. Does anybody see it? It's
the crushing,
yeah,
the Lord.
the crushing language, right? That's Genesis 3:15 is the son of the woman the seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent, right? But Jesus is taking all of our sin. And if we look at Job has been describing his suffering as if he were suffering hell. the pangs of hell already. And in the next speech, Bildad's going to draw a conclusion from that. But Jesus suffers the curse that all unbelievers deserve. And so he is crushed. That's the language being used it's the head crushing language applied here, or echoed at least. In Job 16:15, oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Okay. Job 16:15, Job says he's sewn sackcloth on his skin, meaning that he lives in this sorrow and mourning, as if he had done something, that he needs to be sorrowful and mourning and repentant for. But he's like, this is how I live now. I'm a man of sorrow. When you look at me, you see me in mourning, sorrow. Jesus is described Isaiah 53:3. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hid their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. So that's just chapter 16 so far. We haven't even got to 17. I'm kind of going a little quick because I'm just reading it. Let's stop here for feedback. Anybody have any thoughts about any of this?
It's powerful. It's just powerful. It really touches my spirit. And I had selected some of the verses, but of course, not nearly as many as you had. And it's just causing me to, I'm just going to have to really meditate. I do not want to miss any of this. Not one word. I appreciate this. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to echo that, Chuck. Thank you so much for creating that side-by-side comparison. I find myself extremely emotional right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Amen, sister.
And
Yeah.
I want to thank you for bringing this whole idea to us, because I had never before thought of Job as a type of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so clear.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jane.
Yeah, it is, as you said, it's very clear. I mean, when you see it, it's impossible not to see it. It's not like it's an iffy thing. It's like, oh yeah, definitely that's what's going on here. And the other thing that just adds to the amazement is that this is probably the oldest book in the Bible, Job. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
his story at least predates Moses. So, it's like here we have in the very first, historically, the first book of the Bible, basically, we already have a picture of the Redeemer and a picture of the problem, which is sin being under, receiving the curse, and how it's handled. It's my Redeemer in heaven who will, resurrect me, and we'll stand on the earth together, and he'll be in my own flesh. It's amazing book. I also have a link there to Psalm 69:11 because it mentions making sackcloth my clothing, which is what Job mentions in 16:5, Job 16:5. So Psalm 69:11 does that, but we'll save reading that for chapter 17 because it's going to come up again. So in chapter 17, then moving on to the next table, and that's another set of passages. So in chapter 17, verses 3-4, Job says that it was the Lord's will, or the Lord decreed, that Job's friends would not understand him. And that would bring about God's ultimate triumph over them. They would not succeed. But the friends are also culpable before the Lord for their sinful words and behavior, which is why Job says that next thing that we tried to figure out exactly what he meant. But it was basically, you're not off the hook because God blinded you. Jesus was crucified by wicked men who did not understand what they were doing, and who are also likewise culpable, right? So 1 Corinthians 2, 6-10. Yet among the mature we do impart wisdom, although it's not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age, who are doomed to pass away. But we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. None of the rulers of this age understood this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him. These things God has revealed to us through the Spirit, for the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. So, you saw the verse 8, basically. None of the rulers understood this. They were prevented from seeing what they were doing. In Acts 2, 22-24, we already read these verses, but I'll read them again so you can see how these people don't understand what they're doing. Men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man attested to you by God with mighty works and wonders and signs that God did through him in your midst, as you yourselves know. This Jesus, delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God, you crucified and killed by hands of lawless men. God raised him up, losing the pangs of death, because it was not possible for him to be held by it. After Peter preaches the sermon, then they understood what they did, and they say, what should we do? But they didn't know what they were doing. I didn't include here, but I could have also included Acts, 9? No, 8, Acts 8, right, where Stephen, being stoned to death, looks up to heaven and sees Jesus, and he says, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing, right? I'm remembering that, right? I haven't looked at it recently, but I think, I should probably look at that. But yeah, let me look at that. Just want to make sure I got the right guy. Oh, 7. It's got to be chapter 7. Oh, you Bible scholars out there should have corrected me. Um, he says, don't hold this sin against them. So I thought I was misremembering. Let's see. Oh, of course, it's Jesus. I should have just included this. It's Luke 23:34. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. I'm going to just put that on the table right now. That's Luke 23:34. In Job 17:3, Job places his hope in an advocate in heaven who would guarantee that he would be vindicated and receive from God everything associated with knowing him in salvation. Jesus has gone into heaven on our behalf, and his presence there guarantees our full redemption, both our walking in obedience and the bestowal upon us of all the covenant blessings. So Job, in his looking to the advocate, identifies, the advocate is identified. So here, Job, I have him in a chart as a type of Christ, but it's probably misplaced here, but it's still a great verse. We're going to read those verses. Anyway, Hebrews 6:16-20. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their disputes, an oath is final for confirmation. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. It's talking about Jesus has gone into heaven, into the heavenly temple, into the Holy of Holies. He's the witness in heaven. He's the advocate. He is in Hebrews 7:22. Jesus is the guarantor of a better covenant. He's the one who makes sure it's because he's there in heaven that we are assured that we will be made right with God and receive all of the benefits and blessings associated with being made right with God. And this is how Job looked to his Redeemer. So I apologize. This is slightly off of the stated topic, which was Job as a type, but in your mind, remember it as part of last week's teaching. Job 17:4. Job's friends and who are God's enemies are blinded by his design, therefore they will not be successful. We've already read Acts 2:22-24, which says that. In Job 17:6, Job says God has made Job a byword to the people. A byword in this instance is kind of a living moral lesson. People look at Job and they think, this is what happens to a person who puts on airs, who says he's righteous when he's not, who was rich and looked like he had God's blessings, but really he was a great sinner. This is what happens to all people like that. And so he becomes then basically a byword or a proverb. Oh, remember Job. Don't act like that. Remember Job. In Psalm 69, which is a psalm about Jesus, Jesus quotes it 4 or 5 times about himself, and Paul quotes it about Jesus, and so does Peter. Psalm 69:11. When I made sackcloth my clothing, remember Job said he did that. I sewed sackcloth on my skin. It's my clothing. When I made sackcloth my clothing, I became a byword to them. And Job is in the same position. In Job 17:6 or 17:6, Job says people spit at him or in front of him. It depends on which translation you read and what notes you look at, but many translations and many notes say that what the actual Hebrew text says is people are spitting in his face. People are spitting on Job, and he's down below them. He's seated, and they're spitting in his face. So Job is spit upon, and Jesus is spit upon, right? Matthew 26:67. Then they spit in his face and struck him, and some slapped him. Matthew 27:30, and they spit on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. Mark 14:65, and some began to spit on him and to cover his face and to strike him, saying, prophesy. And the guards received him with blows. Mark 15:19, and they were striking his head with a reed and spitting on him and kneeling down in homage to him. So I want to say something about Job I want to say something about my understanding of what Jesus says when he describes his coming sufferings. When he tells his disciples, we've read several of the passages, I'm going to Jerusalem, I'm going to be delivered over to the hands of the high priests, they're going to deliver me to Gentiles. And then he, depending on the setting, he describes various amount of detail about what's going to happen. And in a couple of cases, he says he's going to be mocked. In some cases, he says he's going to be beaten. And he says he's going to be crucified, rejected. A couple of times he says he's going to be spit upon. Now, I have an understanding that I haven't seen articulated anywhere. So I thought that, in all the reading that I've done, so I thought I would share it with you. And then you can evaluate it. But I think I have this conviction that Jesus is only describing things that are in the Old Testament. He's not adding any detail that is not in the Old Testament. So when he says he's going to be mocked, it's because it's in the Old Testament. And when he says he's going to be rejected, it's because it's in the Old Testament. Same with delivered over to Gentiles, it's in the Old Testament. Same with being spit upon. And so that's my starting assumption. Jesus isn't, adding new stuff. Because when he describes these things later on the road to Emmaus, he says that to the disciples, you should have seen this. It's all in the Old Testament, right? So I think that that's a valid assumption that he's not adding things to the description. He's just taking things that are already in the Old Testament. Now, the reason I said that at this point is because the only place in the Old Testament where somebody is spit upon or spit upon in the face, but we'll just do spit upon, is in Job. Job is the only person in the Old Testament that gets spit upon.
Sure.
But Jesus said he's going to be spit upon. And if it's true, he's only saying things that are already foretold in the Old Testament, then the only place you can get that is Job, which makes Job conclusively a type of Christ, aside from everything else we've looked at. But so anyway, I don't know, any thoughts about that? Have you ever thought about that question? Is Jesus just, he's just describing things and maybe they're new things, but then the disciples, they kind of backfill it by going to the Old Testament and finding things? Or is Jesus just describing what's already in the Old Testament?
I agree with that Jesus is only speaking, of course, what was in the Old Testament, but in that regard to that word spit, my Bible has the option or the privilege, I would say, of giving me more information for just a moment because it prompts me, and one of these is the word spit, because I think I spoke one time about this in class. In NAS, the word spit is identified by a number, and it's called an inferior number, which is a lower number, which gives you more interpretation of that word spit. And you can only find the definition for that inferior number or spit in the Strong's Dictionary, and it says simply this: spit is also could infer a smiting, or it is contempt, which to me, from what you've just said and what we know happened to Christ, is more than just being spit at. It's a strong word. It is an attack. It's a smiting against someone they have contempt for. Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah.
Okay.
I would say certainly that, yeah. I think that those are, I always forget. I think it's a connotation. Mike, I think, knows the difference between connotation and denotation off the top of his head. But I think it's a connotation, right, Mike? That spit is a contemptuous. You have contempt for somebody you spit upon. It's not actually conveying contempt, but it is saying that the situation in which somebody might spit on you involves contempt.
Yeah.
That'd be a connotation.
Connotes
Yeah.
right too for describing that.
Oh, Gary knows too. I forgot that. Yeah.
Good call, Chuck.
Gary knows the difference between effect and affect. It's just he's awesome. No.
I'm flattered.
Yeah. So 17:8, Job 17:8. Many were shocked at Job's physical appearance as a result of his suffering. We already read Isaiah 52:14. Some of the things that Job has mentioned in chapter 16, he mentions again in 17. This is one of them. All in all, there's about 21 or 23 links between Job's situation and in the minute details. Not just they had contempt, which he does say, and we have that in the New Testament too, but that they actually showed it by spitting on him, things like that detail. 21 to 23 crossovers, links between chapters 16 and 17 and the New Testament experience of Jesus. And as a short caveat to that, or qualifier to that, you probably noticed I'm also using some Old Testament passages as fulfillment of the type. I'm saying Psalm 22, which is describing, it is in the present tense, the sufferer on the cross is talking about his suffering. I'm looking at that as a fulfillment of what Job has said. And of course, that's Jesus who's talking in Psalm 22. Same thing in Isaiah 53, same thing in Psalm 69. So it's beyond conclusive, I think, that Job is a type of Christ. I'm convinced just by the spitting, but everything else makes it overwhelmingly unavoidable. So I think that helps us, right? When we're reading Job, I think that helps us a bit to see him. The book is not about why do bad things happen to good people. Unless the good person is Christ, and the bad things that happen to him are because he's redeeming his own. But if we're looking for Job to answer, the question of suffering, we're looking at it wrong. Job is a type of Christ. He is the innocent sufferer, and he battles through the darkness and holds on to his faith, and he is exalted in the end. And he waits for God to appear and to speak and to make it right, and God does. And in that way, Job parallels Christ, and he parallels Christ's people, but preeminently, Job is a picture of Christ as the one who suffers. And the descriptions of Job's sufferings, I think the point I've made here is that the descriptions of Job's sufferings, I put a different chart together that I didn't send out to you guys, which was basically, who is this set of? Is it Job or Jesus? And it turns out it was both of them. He was surrounded by wicked people. His friends betrayed him, the whole list, right? Happened to Job. Why did Jesus know it was going to happen to him? Because he knew Job. How did he know he was going to be spit upon? Because he knew Job. So which is the other way of stating what I said before. Jesus wasn't saying anything that wasn't already in the Old Testament. He was describing his coming suffering because it was already described. So, so anyway, it's included in this lesson tonight is the extra bonus of how to read the Old Testament, right? How to understand the words of Jesus. So I had one more thing. We could do Psalm 2 next week, I think, and then we'll move on to chapter 19, which is going to be more. So chapter 19 is 16, 17. Sorry, says go to chapter 19, but that can't be right. It's going to be chapter 18. Just make sure. Yeah, it's chapter 18. I just typed the wrong thing. I'll fix it right now. Chapter 18 is going to teach a different point. Not that Job is a picture of Jesus. That's not the point of chapter 18, but the point of chapter 18 is Job suffers the suffering of a person in hell. He suffers and this is why Bildad's conclusion is, you're going to hell. Look at your suffering. And then the way Bildad describes it using Job's own words is the way hell is described. And so Jesus takes upon himself that when he suffers. So interesting. It's interesting. So next week we'll pick up at the end here, the Psalm 2 references in Job 16, 10, and 12. There's a table, and we'll look at that. So before we end tonight, anyone have anything else you want to add?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. I'll turn off the recording.